Hi guys, we're back again with a new video where I redesign a phone that is already on the market and preferably an older one. And this time it's the LG G5. Now the LG G5 is quite an interesting phone to redesign because there are clearly some features that I didn't really like about the phone. Heck, even for the first time when I saw that device, or at least the leak of it, it had that antenna line around it and it really looked horrible. Even that horrible when I said, you know what, I'm just gonna do a 360 animation from it and that's it. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this one. I really couldn't find any angle that I liked on the phone. But today we are redesigning it and keeping the features that we already have on that phone. So the replaceable battery will still be a thing, same for the dual camera and so on. So let's start with redesigning and of course talking about what I don't like about the LG G5. So this is the LG G5. Now what the LG G5 had as feature is of course the removable battery. It created some extra features where you can change that out and have some added features to it. For myself though, I really wasn't a fan of it. It didn't look nice and it was quite clumsy as well in terms of replacing the battery. There are some better ways to do that. But also it came with features like having a different kind of speaker, but also I think a camera mount where it was easier to control your camera settings. Like a shutter speed button. Nothing really interesting. But I'm gonna remove that kind of feature because it's not really useful and no one really bought that. So it really doesn't matter that much if I remove that kind of feature. What I do want to keep is of course the removable battery because, well, that's something that is a feature for that phone and I feel like that should not be removed. What I do want to do in terms of design is of course address the hump and the way that the camera is done there. It doesn't look good and it looks way too big. Same for the fingerprint sensor. It just looks weird. I'm not sure what LG was thinking. In terms of a movable back though, what I want to do is, depending on the design itself, I want to make like a metal back that is removable. So what we have is like this clipping system where you can easily push it down and then have it removed. Heck, even with that kind of system, I can implement some idea of using that same focus where you can actually have a feature for this. Like of course that camera thing, because you can push it out and then just put in a new one. But honestly, I don't want to focus on that. What I want to do in terms of design itself is probably have this, instead of having it horizontal, having it vertical, but also implement it separately. So for instance, this flash and the sensor below it, this is kind of boxed in and I want to give it a little bit of more freedom. Also, when it comes to the design itself, the top of it had a curve to it, where it curved backwards. I didn't really like that either, so I'm gonna change that as well. As you can see right here, the top had this little curve to it. I'm not sure why they did that, but I'm gonna change that. In terms of front design, I'm gonna make it completely black. I like the way it looks here, this completely black look. It also makes it look more bezel-less, even though it didn't really have a bezel-less design to begin with. So I'm gonna change those things and I'm gonna see how it comes out in terms of drawing and see what I can implement differently. So like before, what I did with the Samsung Galaxy S5, and if you haven't seen that video, be sure to check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. What I did before was basically start with drawing, getting those ideas that I have on paper. Now for the LG G5, it's originally a horizontal camera setup. For myself, I don't really mind it on the S10, I find it fine, but I always feel like vertical is the better way to go. It just looks more pleasing, even though I get that it will probably leave a bit more space for the battery. Apart from that though, I feel like it really fits well with the LG G4, so I don't know, it feels nicer to have it in a vertical setup. Now with designing there's always a progress, and for myself I noticed that with the LG G5 I felt like the removable back, the way that I actually drawn it out, doesn't really work. I felt like it wouldn't really stick with the design language that LG had around that time, especially with the LG G4 before it. I just felt it didn't really work. So with the LG G5, at least my redesign, I want to focus on giving it a nice texture, something unique and something different, while retaining the plastic back where you can remove it and then of course change your battery. Apart from that, I don't feel like the mods would really work, but again, you can have some imagination and say, okay, it can work with having connectors inside and then having connectors sticking out on the back, where you can actually, when you remove the back and then connect it again with a mod, it would technically be able to work. But I really want to focus on the redesign of this phone. So for one, I really want to have a vertical camera setup. This just looks better to me. And then in 3D, where I actually thought about having this removable sliding back idea, again in 3D I kind of found out that I really didn't like it. I felt like it should just be a one-piece back. It just looks better. And again, it feels a bit more natural to the design term that LG used, and I felt like this would stick out like a sore thumb. So I'm just making it a one-piece back with a really nice texture on it. So that was my take on redesigning the LG G5. What do you think about it? For the process itself, I started off with drawing an idea where I can easily slide off the back. However, at the end I felt like it didn't really work, and what I implemented now worked better. It also feels more consistent with the design term that they had at that time, and the LG G5 kind of stood out because it was so different compared to some other designs they did. I felt like this worked better and it looked better. The vertical camera setup, again, this is something that I prefer overall. It looks more centered and it looks nicer. I separated the sensor and of course the flash and all that because it just worked nicer and it looked better and more clean. So what do you think about the design? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you want to have a phone redesigned, let me know in the comments below so we can talk about that and see if I can add it on the list. There are quite a few on there. Also, I'm thinking about doing this for modern phones. However, the problem is, well, it would get more views because it's a modern phone and it would go higher on the list itself. I'm not sure if I will. Why? Because modern phones are quite boring. They all have a big front screen and they all have hardly any bezels that make it stand out in a way where you can play around with it, and they don't really do anything special with in terms of texture or anything like that. But I do have some ideas, for instance for the Note 10, if I would go for something like that, where I would just add a leather back. It just makes a lot of sense and it would look so much nicer. Anyway, let me know in the comments below. Also, I might do some Patreon stuff more, because I haven't really focused on that, but I will leave a link in the description for Patreon, where I would tease my progress on Patreon itself about the redesign of upcoming phones that I'm working on. Anyway, talk to you guys in the next, and have a good one.